A house is more than a building. It embodies a microcosm with a body and a soul. It communicates through its creaks and cracks, and if you were to listen carefully, you would hear its secrets. What sacrifice lies at its foundation? Whose spirit lies within the hearth? And what's that presence lingering in the corner? My name is Radiana, and I shall carry you across the threshold of ordinary reality to peer beyond the brick walls of your own home and see the world hiding within, for it is magical and begs not to be abandoned. But be warned, this scholarly exploration will take us back to the tragic part of our history when living beings were sacrificed for creation. For some, this may evoke deep emotions and discomfort. If you find the topic distressing, I encourage you to skip this video and explore others that resonate with you on my channel. Thank you, and now our journey begins. It is said in Romanian folklore that not only do humans have guardian angels, but every house has its own protective angel who keeps watch over the home from dawn until midnight. This guardian spirit enters discreetly, observes, and departs just as quietly. It is said that when a sudden hush falls upon a house bustling with people, it is visited by the angel. The angel in this context refers to a house spirit that, although makes its presence known only at certain times, never truly leaves the abode. It is always there, watching over the household. Although we may share our homes with it, our worlds are rather different. Whilst we live in the visible world, house spirits live in the unseen realm of the dead and the supernatural that is always just beyond our grasp. This realm, according to Romanian folklore, is the other world, a world that is said to be upside down and a mirror image of our earthly realm. Time in this world runs opposite of ours. When it's night here, it's day there, and this belief found in Romanian folklore has been noted among many Indo-European cultures and others around the world, including Aztec, Mexican, Egyptian, and African traditions. The spirits and supernatural beings in the other world are said to walk backward or with their feet up, and even their tongues function differently, which explains the unique nature of their speech and twisted apparitions and distorted manifestations. So even when they mean well, they might still frighten us. One can enter their realm through various means, either by descending, ascending, or embarking on long linear journeys to the outermost reaches of the earth, as described in myths and fairy tales. But you need not go any further than your own home, for our worlds collide at the corners and hearth of the house. The house is one of the humanized spaces in our world that we build in our image. It is a sacred microcosm, a haven where we find solace and protection from a world filled with dangers. Its threshold is the boundary one must cross to reach someone's soul, and its walls shelter several layers of intimacy for its residents. For our ancestors, the house held a profound spiritual meaning. It was a sanctuary for the soul where generations were brought into the world, and others departed to the next. Birth and death outside the home were considered unnatural, and rituals were performed to restore the natural order. For instance, if a child was born during field work, they were immediately brought back home and placed near the hearth to consecrate their arrival and present them to the ancestors and the spirits residing within. When building the house, sacrifices were laid in the foundation to imbue the structure with life force, and celebrations were held when raising the roof beams, symbolizing the connection between the earth, personified as the Neolithic mother goddess, and the sky, personified as the Indo-European father god. The building would thus be established not only as a conduit for human existence, but also spiritual presence. The creation of the interior sacred space, centered around the hearth, served as a protective barrier against evil forces and marked a binding contract with the tutelary spirit of the home. Everything was thus chosen with purpose, and everything had a magic function, from the land to the wood and stone for the construction, from laying the foundation to raising the roof beams, and from the four corners to the hearth. The act of choosing a location to build a house was deeply religious and involved distinct magical practices. Naturally, our ancestors strictly avoided certain places, especially those associated with death or fires. But they also avoided building on top of anthills, as they believed it would deter guests from visiting, although others considered this to be a good thing. They likewise avoided areas with dry patches and wastelands, as they believed those to be the territory of supernatural beings. And so, our ancestors would often perform rituals to test the suitability of a location or seek consent from dwelling spirits. According to Romanian tradition, they would spend a few nights at the location, and if their sleep was undisturbed, they considered it a good omen. Other times, they would leave a cup of water overnight, and if the water level rose slightly by morning, it was seen as a favorable sign. Traditions for determining the suitability of a location and seeking approval from spirits can be found all across northern and eastern European countries. For the Finns, Swedes, and Estonians, it was important to avoid paths, underground waterways, and field borders, as these were believed to be inhabited by spirits. Likewise, Romanians also avoided field borders and crossroads, considered liminal places at the intersection between the other world and ours. If the land and signs were deemed favorable, our ancestors would then seek the approval of earth spirits to proceed with the construction. They would traditionally perform various rituals under the guidance of an elder, shaman, or magician, who would seek to appease the dwelling spirits or recruit them as guardians of the household. Their deep reverence for nature and their spiritual connection with the earth was also reflected in the selection of wood and boulders for the construction. Trees, like stones, were believed to be the dwellings of spirits, and so certain types of wood were considered sacred and not to be taken without permission. The spirits of trees were also believed to become house guardians through the wood used for the roof beams. To honor them and return what was taken, people would plant trees on the property. When harvesting wood from a forest, preferably during a full moon, it was customary to leave 9 pieces behind to decay. According to Romanian tradition, each piece represented different types of wood infestations that would thus be kept away from the house. If the wood selected for construction had cracks, prayers would be inscribed onto it to prevent it from sprouting. Likewise, repurposed wood from old or demolished structures had to be purified, and people tested its suitability before use. In some Romanian regions, master builders would strike it with a carpenter's axe. If sparks flew, it was considered a bad omen, foretelling of a house fire. When construction was ready to begin, a feast on the property would be held to appease the spirits, and then the process of laying the foundation would commence. If the new home was to be built on the site of a demolished house, the foundation had to be laid 1 meter ahead of the old structure to signify progress. Traditionally, the construction would begin from east on a Thursday or a Monday, and never on a Tuesday or a Saturday. Initiating constructions on Mondays and Thursdays, correlating with the moon's phases, was considered favorable for a prosperous household. At nearly every stage of the construction, rituals for good luck and protection were performed. Items like glass bottles, coins, herbs, and seeds were buried in all 4 corners of the foundation to attract good fortune and repel negative energies or misfortunes from attaching to the new house. When the rafters were raised, wheat, bean cobs, and towels from each builder were also placed as symbolic sacrifices. And after the roof was fixed, it was decorated with an evergreen branch to indicate completion. The house would then be consecrated, starting with a feast for the family, craftsmen, and neighbors. In some regions, the homeowners would also call a priest to bless the house and offer him a roast chicken as well as a living rooster for the house's cheerfulness and luck. The first person to enter the new house was believed to influence its fortune. Traditionally, the man of the house would be the first to enter and immediately place a coin, bread, and salt in the 4 corners for good luck and protection. Additionally, the oldest man in the village was the first to sleep in the building, to symbolize the wish for a long life and prosperity for the home's residents. Depending on the region and according to local beliefs, people performed complex consecration rituals passed down from generation to generation, believing that the building of a new home would bring about the death of someone in the family. Many believe that the first person to sleep in the house would die sooner, which is another reason why an old person was requested to spend the first night in the house. Some people tossed a chicken over the threshold before entering to give the house a soul, whilst others sent their cats in first because they believe cats lived longer than other animals. These beliefs and rituals, some of which are still upheld today, originate from ancient religious practices and myths that have taught us for generations that no creation comes without sacrifice. Building a house was seen as an act of creation, a new beginning, and a reiteration of a cosmogonic plot. The house itself held religious value, representing the establishment of a new axis mundi or center of the world. The alignment of the construction with cardinal points and phases of the moon, alongside an array of consecration traditions and ritual sacrifices, show that our ancestors reenacted the cosmic sacrifice when building their homes. The original cosmic sacrifice can be traced to the reconstructed Proto-Indo-European myth of the primordial twins Manu and Yemo, where the first brother sacrifices the other to create the cosmos in an act that shapes the world and humanity. Thus, Manu meaning man becomes the first priest, and Yemo meaning twin becomes the first king, lord of the dead and the other world, and source of the universe. From his sacrificed body, all natural elements and social structures emerge. The sun is made from his eye, the sky from his head, the earth from his feet, the grass from his hair, and so on. Yemo is thus a macrocosmic projection of the sacrificed man, and his transformation into the source of the universe marks the beginning of religious rituals for the transfer of life force or energy into a new creation. This motif is reenacted in building traditions, creation myths, and legends across the world, including the Romanian ballad of Master Manole, who sacrificed his pregnant wife by walling her up during the construction of the monastery of Argeș. While that is a story I shall tell you another time, for now, the commentary of Mircea Eliade on it extends to our topic today. He explained that this legend, like many others of its kind, through the typological integration in the cosmogonic myths, implies that the world was made by sacrificing a primordial being, and man is creative by repeating that original act. And so, the sacralization of any construction in mythical thinking required life itself, a principle that finds its justification in the myth of the cosmic sacrifice, which reveals the need to transfer a vital principle into the newly constructed reality, essentially giving life to the new building. Through this ritual, the anthropocosm, the human being, does not cease to exist after being sacrificed, only in appearance, for they continue to exist in the worlds that were born of them, and which last because they, through their violent death, have animated them. Each sacrifice thus becomes an integration through semiotic continuity, generating new codes of meaning. The ritual death generates a force that not only makes life possible, but also ensures the permanence of the new creation that gave birth to it, making the architectural gesture a replica of creation. We see this especially in Slavic and Romanian traditions where the house is viewed as a microcosm with a body and a soul, with various aspects symbolizing either cosmic elements or body parts, such as the roof representing the sky or the windows representing the eyes. We can see this as a reflection of archaic man's animistic and sympathetic perception of creation, but also as a principle embedded in collective thinking by a history of ritual sacrifices. Archaeological excavations in Europe found evidence of animal skulls, bones, and other objects buried near the corners of houses. The oldest verified sacrifices seem to have involved horses, followed by roosters and hens in more recent times. These also had apotropaic purposes for our ancestors. In Romanian tradition, for instance, burying a rooster in the foundation or the east or south corner was believed to ward off evil entities. And across Europe, it was believed that burying animal heads and spilling their blood in the foundation would ensure the luck, safety, and well-being of the homeowners. Ritual sacrifices for the construction of houses, temples, fortresses, and bridges exist in various traditions around the world, from Southeast Asia to Northern Europe, and are described in Slavic folk songs as well as early American folklore. Throughout the Balkan Peninsula and across Turkey and Asia, ballads, tales, and master builder legends, often including the motif of the entombed wife, occupy a special place in folklore, where the sacrifice is seen as a transfer of the soul into the new structure, essentially a reenactment of the sacrifice in Indo-European cosmogony. To better understand the original cosmic sacrifice and what it means in our context, I invited my dear friend and specialist in Indo-European mythology, John White, to explain this further.
Thank you, Crohag. Now let me take a few minutes to explain the Indo-European cosmogony and how it relates between man, the cosmos, and his home. One of the catalysts for the creation of the cosmos in Indo-European mythology is Manu and Jimo wanting somewhere to settle, a home. And so to create this material home, Manu sacrifices Jimo and he builds the cosmos, the stars, the sun, the moon, and he builds the earth. And with Jimo's body, he builds the people on the earth. And the cosmogony of the Indo-Europeans is such that in response to this, the humans on the earth believe that when someone is born, the material that makes up that person, their bones, their flesh, their blood, comes from the cosmos. And when someone dies, that material goes back to the cosmos. And this isn't a slow decay in the process. This is a almost immediate transfer. There is always a consistent level of material if you merge all humans and cosmos together. And so we can push this idea forward into houses and the home, such that where material is taken from the cosmos to build a human, and so a human is a microcosm of the cosmos, and the cosmos a macrocosm of the human, we can actually look at the home as almost being a microcosm of the cosmos. And so man can be considered almost like an equal level in material to a home, such that if materials are required for the home, then a man can be sacrificed, and the material that man's body gives to the cosmos is enough to build the home. Now, what is important here is the quality of the materials, and therefore, are you just building a home? In which case, perhaps you could sacrifice a prisoner of war or a slave, or would you sacrifice someone more important if it is a more important home? And we find that through time, human sacrifices start to dwindle as animals are then brought in to be sacrificed. And eventually we see animals being taken off the sacrificial table, so to speak, and items used. And this is just human nature and humans growing up with better morals and ethics, that it isn't right to kill a person or an animal for this sort of thing. But certainly if we go back several thousand years, we see animal sacrifices to create that home. And what is important is that, again, the quality of the animal, but also the parts of the animal given. So sometimes the whole animal is used, but what we see in sacrificial rituals that have been documented, and this is not just in the Indo-European landscape, but actually outside of that as well, is that parts of the animal are considered better than other parts. So let's say the rib meat is probably less important than leg meat, which is sort of more substantial. And so you actually see various parts of sacrificial bodies used or given as in a sign of respect of the sacrificer has to the recipient of that. And so that is the nature of the Indo-European cosmogony, and why we see sacrifice being used to create the materials in the cosmos for the home that someone will then live in. I hope that makes sense, and enjoy the rest of the video.
Thank you, John. Fortunately, as mankind evolved, Sacrifices that once involved taking the life of living beings have been substituted by simulations such as shadow immurement. Some have also immured or entombed symbolic sacrifices such as statuettes, ropes of life-sized measurements, and, more recently, photographs. However, it was believed that the beings whose representation were used for the ritual would pass away within a designated period, ranging from 9 days to a year. According to tradition, every new house demands a soul, and that is why a newly created thing is perilous in mythical thinking. According to Eliade, it is a form of death. Something that has yet to be can only be by absorbing the soul of the first being that comes into contact with it. This is why the first person entering the house would immediately make offerings in the four corners to appease the new creation and prevent the house from taking one's soul. In many Slavic, Baltic, and Nordic regions where urbanization was slower to take hold, people still make symbolic sacrifices, especially coins, eggs, and seeds, reflecting both a departure from primitive thinking and an evolved philosophy of energy transfer. In Romanian tradition, and especially in the northeastern regions of the country, entombing one's shadow or height, either in the foundation or a wall, was customary, particularly when digging trenches for buildings, wells, or cellars, to prevent structural collapses. After death, usually within a year, the soul would become bound to the wall where the shadow was immured. The soul would be transferred to the structure and thus become its guardian. Within the home, it would often appear as a fleeting shadow that you could spot from the corner of your eye, and its appearance would often remain consistent with the person or animal they were in life. After dusk and until the roosters crow, the shadow would wander around the home, returning to its designated hiding place just before the break of dawn. It would not show itself to the occupants all that often, but it would appear to visitors to intimidate them, either by knocking them over, immobilizing them, or making them dizzy. To appease the guardian, residents would leave food offerings overnight. Common offerings to domestic spirits include wine, water, milk, honey, bread, polenta, salt, eggs, and meat, typically placed near cellars or high places within the house. Once the offering was placed, residents would leave the spot without looking back to not disturb the feast of these shadows who prefer not to be seen. House spirits were likewise considered ancestors. In fact, some ancestors were believed to remain in their earthly homes and watch over the household for generations to come. As Eliade explained in the myth of the eternal return, the transformation of a deceased person into an ancestor reflects the fusion of the individual into an archetypal category. In various traditions, such as Greek, the souls of common deceased individuals lose their memory, meaning they lose their historical individuality. The transformation of the deceased into ghosts or similar entities signifies their re-identification with the impersonal archetype of the ancestor. Thus, house spirits were honored as part of dead veneration and ancestor worship traditions. On dedicated festivals and celebrations, women would perform house cleansing rituals and cook special meals for the dead, including the house spirit, who would always have a ritual meal set aside, especially if they appeared previously in dreams expressing hunger. At Christmas, they would be offered milk, which is considered the water of the afterlife. Otherwise, it was believed that misfortune would fall upon the household. Even when moving houses, people would leave offerings behind for the spirit and send some in advance for the spirit of the new house to ensure a smooth transition between abodes. It was said that leaving offerings in the old home would not only show gratitude to the spirit for its service, but also help the family moving in to have a prosperous life within those walls. What makes house spirits different from most supernatural entities is their unbreakable bond with the location. This is often portrayed as an unfortunate afterlife, especially in today's pop culture. However, in mythical thinking, the transformation into a house spirit ensured the integration of an individual into a divine pantheon where they were worshipped alongside domestic deities and ancestors. But not all house spirits accepted this fate, and they have been bound to buildings against their will. The presence of such tragic and resentful spirits reflecting a collective trauma is quite common in the wider Balkan region. According to folklore, Many prominent structures, such as fortresses, bridges, and monasteries, are said to have been built upon unwilling sacrifices, like in the Ballad of Master Manole. These beliefs did extend to ordinary homes as well, with folk stories and legends claiming that human sacrifices were conducted in secrecy. Despite little evidence supporting those tales, superstitions still linger today, such as the belief in shadow theft, which originates from the tradition of shadow immurement. The shadow, as a symbol of one's soul, being immured within a structure was believed to cause the death of the person. Even today, people are fearful of builders stealing their shadows and are cautious not to stand near construction sites when their shadows are visible. Capturing one's shadow against their will, or someone passing away unexpectedly at a construction site, was believed to turn them into the ghost of the house. Although not as dangerous as a strigoi, moroi, or other supernatural entities connected to the family, the ghost of the house was still believed to be a source of misfortune within the home. If the residents could win its favor and bring it solace through offerings, it was believed that the ghost would reward them with prophecies, warnings against disasters, and reveal hidden treasures on the property. Contrary to agreeable domestic spirits whose descriptions seem to vary from one house to another, the ghost of the house is widely described as a female with a ghastly appearance, possibly reflecting the entombed wife motif. Her appearance tends to be consistent throughout folklore, with a towering stature, long disheveled hair, and waxy skin either blackish or yellow. She has a tendency to create nightly disturbances by making loud noises, breaking dishes, and inducing nightmares, but she can be appeased with small, regular offerings. Although she rarely shows herself, it is believed that she appears to residents before a disaster or the death of someone in the family, and her paranormal activities often increase before such events as a way to warn the residents. When her presence becomes unbearable and residents abandon the house, the building falls prey to decay. The more it decays, the more the haunting escalates into a poltergeist complete with stone pelting and physical attacks on intruders. The same type of haunting is said to happen in an abandoned house with an otherwise agreeable spirit that was neglected and forgotten. It is thus apparent that ancestral beliefs about household spirits continue to influence contemporary beliefs about hauntings. Whilst earlier cultures attributed hauntings to house spirits based on their animistic beliefs, later interpretations attributed the phenomena to witchcraft and demonic entities. It is this shift in mentality influenced by Christian demonology that led to the conflation of house spirits with other supernatural entities. Perhaps clarifying this misunderstanding can put some ghosts to rest. After all, understanding and connecting to ancestral beliefs about household spirits can be more reassuring than attributing hauntings to diabolical phenomena. When I was a little girl, my paternal grandfather told me many stories about the spirit of his childhood home, which he described as kind, gentle, and protective. It was not at all one of the shadow spirits from ancient sacrifices, nor was it a restless ghost. The house spirit I grew up knowing was a snake, and it made the sound of a ticking clock as it slithered inside the walls. Especially here in the western part of the country, the house spirit is said to have the form of a snake that knows everything that goes on within the household and watches over the family. It is believed by locals that not only every house has its snake, but also every soul in the house has its own house snake, which dies together with the person next to whom and for whom it lived, or together with the destruction of the respective house. Ethnologist Tudor Pamphile noted in his writings that, if one were to listen carefully on a summer's day in complete silence, in the chamber of an old cob house, they could hear now and then a ticking akin to that of a pocket watch. This ticking is believed to be made by a being called the snake of the house, the spirit of the house, or the house clock. It has the appearance of an ordinary snake, but the color of its scales is white or yellowish white, because it only lives in the shadows, like the plant that grows sheltered from the sun's rays. The snake does not bite, and it lives in the walls of the house, and you ought not to kill it, for that is not good. It is said that if the snake flees from one's house, then that house will remain deserted, or many within it will perish. It only shows itself to children with whom it often shares the food cooked by the parents. In Transylvania, it is said that the good fortune of a house hinges entirely on the snake, whose killing is considered a sin. Even in Bukovina, Macedonia, and Moldavia, it is believed that killing this snake would bring about the death of one of the residents or the cattle. In some parts, it is said that the man or the woman of the house would perish, whilst in others, it is said that the luck of the house perishes at once with the snake. According to folk beliefs, the house snake rests in the sacred spaces of the home, under the hearth, in the walls, in the beam, especially under the eaves, or under the threshold, the latter also being a belief recorded throughout Slavic folklore. When no one is at home, it emerges from the hearth or threshold to roam freely and drink milk. However, in some instances, it is said to follow the members of the family closely wherever they go. Children are said to eat side by side with it and even play together. The entity is often described with a rather touching gentleness, which makes killing it all the more vile. In some folk songs and ballads, it is claimed that it can also reach fabulous dimensions, making sure that the oaths made in the house, so charged with a special power, are carried out. Although it shows itself rarely and only to children, it is believed that a snake appears before the family to protect or warn them. It may appear without notice on the doorstep, in bed, or near the hearth, but its appearance is never as unsettling as its disappearance. It is believed that if the snake abandons a house, either for being dishonored or driven away by disorder, the house becomes no man's land. Without the snake's protection, unwelcome spirits can congregate there and transform the once sacred space into a hostile environment. The reverence for the house snake in Romanian folklore is a reflection of ancestral snake worship among earlier cultures. Most peoples have worshipped the snake as the genius of the house. Due to its skin shedding and hibernation cycles, it was considered immortal and therefore assimilated to a deity related to rejuvenation. The snake cult has also been attested archaeologically between 6500 and 3500 BCE in southeastern Europe, as well as in Minoan Crete, where figurines or snake goddesses have been discovered in domestic sanctuaries, which attest to their constant veneration and importance for the well-being of the clan and family. It can be assumed that, in prehistoric times, living snakes were kept in houses or at their foundations as symbols of the perpetuation of life, just as they were still kept at the beginning of the last century in Lithuania. Among Romanians, the snake of the house is frequently carved on the pillars of the gates, painted on the bottom of glazed clay balls, or molded into the plaster of the house walls. In Oltenia and some areas of Transylvania, snakes of glazed clay are also placed on the thresholds or floors of houses. Similar snake depictions and figurines were revered in various cultures, like the Phoenicians and Egyptians, often symbolizing fertility or protection. In Greco-Roman traditions, we find the serpent guarding the city of Athens, believed to represent the soul of the ancient king Erechtheus. Likewise, the rulers of Thebes were believed to transform into snakes after death. In both ancient and modern Greece, snakes were considered house geniuses or daimons. When well treated, they were said to bring good luck. When angered, they took it back. They were associated with Zeus Ctesios, pater familias, or protector of the household, likewise depicted in the form of a snake. In Roman beliefs, keeping a snake's head under the threshold was believed to bring good fortune, whilst for Romanians, a similar practice was believed to give the homeowner the power to identify evil spirits. In ancient Roman religion, snakes were represented on the shrines dedicated to domestic deities referred to as lares familiares, or simply lar familiaris in singular form, with the word lar believed to originate from the Etruscan for lord, which other Greek and Roman sources refer to as hero or daimon. The Romans believed that these entities had great influence over their households and lives, and their reverence for them was reflected in their language. When a Roman returned home, it was said that he was going ad larem, or to the lar. They honored these deities with daily offerings and celebrated them during annual festivals. They even buried infants who died before their fourth day near the gutter, where they believed the lares to reside. The shrine dedicated to them, the lararium, was often set up near the hearth, and it displayed statuettes and murals of bearded or crested snakes, believed to symbolize fertility, prosperity, health, peace, and procreative power. The lar familiaris was believed to watch over the household and everyone in it, and was, like all house spirits, bound to the location. So, when a family moved, the lar would remain behind. House spirits have a long history, and they evolve differently in different cultures. Whilst in early animistic cultures they were spirits of the dead, earth, wood, and stone bound to their location, over time they became conflated with other supernatural beings, from dwarves and elves to minor deities and demons, bound to the residence. In Slavic folklore, house spirits are referred to as domovoi and are often depicted as very hairy elderly figures representing protective ancestors and the progenitors of the kin. They can shapeshift, sometimes taking the appearance of the homeowner to venture out at night without arousing suspicion. Meanwhile, in Celtic and Germanic folklore, house spirits often resemble small elderly men such as dwarfs and gnomes. These beings are said to emerge from their hiding places at night, disrupting the sleep of residents by moving furniture and making loud noises as they do their chores. But no matter how different in behavior or appearance, house spirits were consistently associated with sacred places within the home, such as the corners, threshold, and, more importantly, the hearth. The close connection between house spirits and the hearth suggests that many domestic entities are avatars or secularized forms of gods and goddesses from classical antiquity. In Lithuanian traditions, for instance, the hearth and the fire within it were directly connected to Dimis Patis, a god believed to protect homes from fires, and to whom people made offerings like chickens or pigs. In Romanian folklore, the hearth is a personification of life and sustenance, considered a protector of marriage and a symbol of stability, and it is identified with Vesta, the Roman goddess of the hearth, and her Greek counterpart, Hestia. It is considered a portal between the other world and ours, and its extension, the chimney, is a channel of communication and a conduit for good forces, such as the stork delivering children or Father Christmas bearing gifts, as well as evil forces such as the strigoi and witches or deadly thunder. For the archaic men, daily life revolved around the hearth. It was where food was prepared and people warmed up, where spells, charms, and incantations worked best, where the future was foretold, and the fate of unmarried girls was revealed. Looking up from the hearth, a girl seeking a husband would call out to her beloved, and a young bride would offer prayers for giving birth to healthy children. And sometimes the goddess took the form of a stork to deliver the desired child in its beak. Women gave birth at the hearth, holding on to the metal parts of the chimney while the midwife performed the baby's first breath right there. The hearth was also where offerings were made to honor the memory of the departed and the spirits of the house. In some regions, the hearth, fireplace, stove, or oven was the very essence of the house spirit, a source of warmth and sustenance that safeguards the dwelling from deterioration. As in most Indo-European cultures, the fire burning within it had a magical function, symbolizing transformation and the connection between the living and the dead. All important gatherings and bindings were held before it, with the ancestors and spirits of the house as witnesses. Today, the traditional bonds between people and their homes have faded. Spirits have been abandoned and hearts lost their magic. Living spaces have become soulless as people move frequently, leaving ancestral spirits behind and unawarely intruding upon others. In most rural regions, the spiritual meaning of the house has not been completely lost, and some traditions and beliefs are still upheld today. Old houses that still stand tell stories of ancient spirits through the faded carvings and inscriptions on their facades and mantelpieces. But wherever we are in the world, we all live on old land imbued with the life force of those who came before us. And just when we think we are alone in our homes, we may see a fleeting shadow from the corner of our eyes, maybe sense something watching from the corner of the room, or maybe hear a slight ticking slithering within the walls. Until next time, remember, your luck is bound to wherever your house is. Before you go, I'd like to thank you for watching my video and for all your wonderful comments this year. There will be one more video from me before the year ends, and it will be published on my new Patreon first. You can join me there too if you'd like early ad-free access as well as access to my curated art gallery. Thank you once again for all your support, and thank you to Krakenford for being a part of this video. His channel is linked in the description for those who want to dive deeper into Indo-European mythology, which is at the root of many stories that I tell on my channel. So, thank you once again, and until next time.